Let me
Well, that's right. Acknowledgement in progress here.
Yeah, so I haven't done that version yet. You know, the straight flat picking one. I've just done the duet version and the finger picking one, but I'm thinking
Yeah.
about it. You know.
Well, so I looked at the finger picking one, and what I was thinking about when I was watching the finger picking one, and then based on my experience doing the other one and working through the other one and all, and combining that with the notion that that the just keeping the beat going, particularly, and certainly in Ashokan Farewell, hitting the right ups and downs is really important. But it all flows when you do it.
Right.
It all flows and it sounds right and all that kind of stuff. So moving it to another key, what I was thinking to myself was, well, one song where I can do that, where I've learned to do that, is "Here Comes the Sun."
Hmm.
So I sort of have the sense of that in "Here Comes the Sun," and so in my mind it should be adaptable. That skill should be adaptable, and the question became finding the right notes and deciding which ones, how much of, which ones are the ones to hit,
Yeah.
if you will. I mean, that's really what the question was. Like in "Here Comes the Sun," you're not hitting, it's not it's not hitting every single one,
Right.
but and so there's part of the chords and all that. So I looked at Ashokan Farewell in G,
Mhm.
your finger picking one, and was just beginning to um, just try to think about how to do that. I guess
Yeah.
that's as far as I got
Okay.
on the whole thing. So I mean, I know that the progression, thinking about the progression of the whole thing, was kind of um, the first thing that I thought about was, obviously from the other one. So it has to go from G to G with B in the bass.
Right.
Gotta go to G and the B in the bass, and then it would have to go to, let's see, it's got to go to the two.
Oh, you were right. You were going. You were heading the right place. Where's it going first?
Well, it goes well. It's on the one,
Right.
then it's on the one with B in the bass.
Yeah, and it's good to note there that what we have in there is the third in the bass, right?
Yeah,
Third of the chord. Usually, when that happens, when you go to the third in the chord, like it's normal to alternate a bass thing from the root down to the fifth, like a teach your children kind of strum. Bum, 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 bum.
yeah,
It's unusual to go to the third unless it's there for a reason. And in this case, it's there for a reason. It's acting as a leading tone. That B, and now leading tone is leading tone is the name for the seventh step of a scale. The first step of a scale is called the tonic. The fifth step's called the dominant, right? There's a name for every step of the scale. We don't. The others are not important for now. But the seventh one's called the leading tone, and that's the note that's a half step below the tonic.
right. And it goes to C.
I go right. So that's what that's doing. See, that B is acting as a leading tone to pull us to C. That's the normal place that you put a third in the bass. Is when
Right,
you're going to a chord that is a fourth away from where you were, and so that third acts as a leading tone to get you to chord to four, which is now the root of the next chord.
okay,
So anyway, so yeah, uh,
okay,
that's like the theory logic behind that. That's why there's a B in the bass. It's to pull you to C.
right, okay, a C. And then in Ashokan Farewell, it then goes to the two,
Right.
which in this case has to be A minor,
Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Okay. And so then we're back to C, um, and then
Not C, not C.
I'm sorry, G.
Yeah.
G. Back to G.
Okay, you're playing the right thing.
We're
So
back to G, and now we have to go. Let me think about this. Oh, we have to go to the six.
right.
Yeah. Um, and so the six in D is B minor.
Right. So what are we going to do in G?
Hmm?
So what are we going to do in G?
Uh, I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
So we're playing this in G, right?
Yeah.
You gave me the 6 in D, which is
Oh, B minor. Oh, right,
right.
right, right, right,
So that's sort
right,
of
right,
unrelated to what
right.
your quest was here.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. And so in it's E minor.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The six is E minor. And then after E minor, after the C, we go to G6.
And the 6 is kind of optional. So what we really just worry about is what chord number is that in D?
Yeah, it's 4.
So where are we going now?
It's 4, so we're going to C.
Yeah. If and the 6, when I say the 6 is optional, it kind of depends on what the melody's doing here. Like it might be uncomfortable for us to make this a 6 chord and get the melody note that we need. So we can kind of, we want to at least get the fundamental part of that chord, which is just really 4.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 4. Yeah, the 6, and then we go to the 5th.
Right.
Right. And so
Yeah. So that's 8 measures. That's half of our section, right?
right.
So strum through that once, just without playing any melody. Just strum through that and listen to the chord progression as you run through it, so you can hear, hear how they progress and how they what it sounds like. Just
Right. Okay. So we're okay. Okay. Now I have to remember what I was doing.
Why did we put that B in the bass? What was
Oh
it?
yeah, that's right. Thank you. That's
Okay. Yeah.
that's the right hint.
Okay. Yeah.
We went from the C, which was the equivalent of the G. Oh,
Good. Yeah. Okay. So that's our first 4 measure phrase. Is
right.
B, then the third in the bass, then
Right.
C to A minor, or 4 to 2.
Right.
Now
4
we're
and
in
2.
the second phrase, which is 1.
Right. It's 1.
Now we need 2 more chords. We have 2 more measures here.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the target measure 8, really has to get to chord 5. That's what's going on here. Is we're running through this progression, and at the halfway point, we want to land on 5 on the dominant chord. And
Right.
now the next 8 measures could be very similar, but we got to get back to 1.
We got to get back to 1. Right.
Measure 16.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
15 has got to be chord 5.
Right.
Somewhere along the line, we're either going to double up in a measure where we have 2, if we're going to follow the same progression. We're either going to put 2 chords in a measure, or we're going to skip one of those on the way through.
Right.
Because chances are the third line is just like the first. Like this is standard
Right.
composition 101.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So now we've got the third line the same as the first.
I'm not sure why this is so troubling to me. Yeah,
Yeah,
it goes here. Right? No.
No, the other one.
Here. Goes here. Okay, it goes.
And now this is where we have to leave something out. We got to be. You just did 6 measures.
Right.
This next measure has to be D. You got to get to 5 now. In order to get home, measure 8. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay.
Make sense? So the logical thing to do there is leave out the measure of C. Just go from G to E minor to D to G.
Right.
Now that's not exactly what it does, but that's what it should have done. Okay.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so he brought in a kind of a little twist here that is not a big deal, but he didn't go to E minor there. I'm pretty sure. I might have to dig up the D one or take a look at it. But if you think about it, the 4th line, and again, you want to have this in your head as 4 lines of 4 measures each,
Right.
right? And we're thinking from the beginning, we have 1 with 3 in the base for the second measure. Then it goes to 4, then it goes to 2. Then back to 1, to 6, to 4. We're like halfway, right?
Right. Yeah.
We're going to assume line 3 is just like line 1, which I believe it is. You know, we got 1, then with the 3rd in the base, right? And then to 4 and to 2. And now, if we're just following Neil's rules of composition, we do G to E 1 to 6, to 5, 5,
Oh.
and then home to 1. And again, there is one thing that it does that is not that. It does something very similar. And the G chords 1 and 6, and actually 2 and 4. Anytime you've got a major chord, a step and a half below it, you have its relative minor. As if, like in the case of, if we were in the key of C, C would be 1, A minor would be 6.
Okay.
In G, we've got G is 1, E minor is 6.
Okay.
We even have in the key of G, C is 4, but its relative minor is 2. We have C and A minor in the key.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, so every major chord, if we're talking about its own key, has its relative minor key, and that's always based on step 6 of the key.
Okay.
Right? So every chord, we could almost say every major chord has its relative minor chord,
Yeah.
which would always be 1 to 6.
Yeah.
Okay? And the other major chord in G that we haven't talked about in the last 2 minutes since I brought this up about relative minor stuff is chord 5.
D.
D. And if we were in D, what's its relative minor?
B minor.
And B minor is in this key as well. It's in the key of G.
Yes.
It's 3.
Yes.
So if I tell you that we're trying to figure out what key a song is in,
Yeah.
we only know one thing. We know it's got an A chord in it. We can hear that there's an A in there. We can't find anything else just yet. Or I haven't given you anything else just yet. That's enough information for you to narrow it down to 3 possible keys.
Right.
Okay? A's got to be 1, 4, or 5.
Right.
Now, if we figure out that it's got also a D chord in it,
Yeah.
that eliminates one of those keys, because A cannot be 5 in this case. Oh, yes, it can. Wait a minute. Anyway, if we have 2 chords now that are a fourth apart, like A and D,
Yeah.
D is in the key of A,
Right.
and A is in the key of D.
Right.
Those are the only 2 keys that have both of those chords. So now you have a little bit more information. We've been able to narrow it down to one of those has to be 1.
Okay.
Okay? But if I told you it had A and G in it,
Yeah.
there's only one possibility of what key that could be, because what chord numbers would those have to be? If we
One
have
and four.
no A and G.
A and G. Well, if A was one,
Right. Would
um,
G be a major chord in A?
no, it's not.
Okay. And if we were in the key of G, would A be in there as a major chord?
No.
Right. We have two chords that are next to each other that are one step apart.
So they're four and five.
Neither of them can be one. Right. So that's enough information for us to figure out what key it is. If you've got two major chords next to each other, it's got to be the chord that makes those four and five, or the key that makes those four and five. Right. Okay. But now let's say we have A and F sharp minor in it, which would be the relative minor of A. That would be step 6 of an A scale.
Okay.
Well, if A was 1, if we're in the key of A, I mean that's a possibility. Because A would F sharp minor would be 6.
Right.
If we were in the key that had A as 4,
Okay.
F sharp minor would still be in there because it would be 2.
Two. Yeah.
If it turned out A was 5, F sharp minor would be in there as 3.
There's three.
So that doesn't help us at all. If anytime you've got one chord in the key, its relative minor is guaranteed to be in there.
Right.
Okay, you're never going to have a key. That doesn't mean you won't have a song that does this. So I have to be careful
Yeah.
how I phrase this.
Right.
You're never going to have a key that has like C major in it and A major in it, because A is the relative minor of C,
Right.
and an A chord, A major, has to have the note C sharp in it. So those two are mutually exclusive,
Right.
right? So anyway, um, so one way to even pin down quickly what the chords are in a key, if you know 1, 4, and 5, all of their minors come along with them. It's like it's a team deal.
Right.
So now the reason, and then since I brought up C and A when I just said that means that they can't be in the same key, that doesn't mean you can't write something really cool that uses them. So, but see, it's got such a distinctive sound when you hear
Right.
that C to A, and with that rhythm, it's like, oh man, that you can't miss that song.
Sure.
But anyway,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
it's unusual, and so he really hit on something there. And
Right. Right.
I don't know if you ever heard Fogarty talk about that song, but he had a very famous classical piece in mind when he put that together. Can you place it? It's not played with that kind of rhythm, but just that melody. Da da da
Oh,
dum.
Beethoven's Fifth.
That's like
Yeah.
that's what he was thinking. Is
Yeah.
make
Huh.
it sound like Beethoven's Fifth.
I'll be darned. Huh. That's a great story.
Yeah, yeah. So okay, now so to get back to where we were just talking about here, um, line 4 then
Right.
seems like it should have done what line 2 did.
Right.
G to E minor to skip the C, get to D. And the exception that it does here is the second measure of line 4 is the same as lines 1 and 3. Instead of going to E minor, he does the chord 1 with the third in the bass again.
Oh.
Right. Which you can just tell by looking at your hand that it's very similar to an E minor chord anyway. In E minor, you've got all those notes too.
Right.
So,
Right. Right.
so this is not a big, like, if he went to, so in the first line we have this. Second line, G to E minor, C to D. Third line, same as the first, B in the bass, C, A minor. But if he did something like this, now what I did was I went to B minor, which
Yeah.
gets the same bass note, but you could hear that sounds like, oh, that's not how it goes. That's that. Now that's not how it could have gone like that,
Uh-huh.
but it didn't. He still wanted the B in the bass in that line heading to chord 5. But anyway, okay, I'm talking sort of in circles with this, but hopefully you got some of that.
And yeah, I learned some things there. So what? Okay, so but what happens then is it's in line 4.
Yes.
Line 4 is to here,
Right.
right?
Instead of E minor that we would have guessed because that's what he did in line 2.
Right,
Right.
right.
And
And
still
then
great. Yeah.
it
We're down. We only have how many measures left?
2,
Two. So we
2, and we have to get back to here.
right.
So we go
Right. So the D has to be moved up to measure 3 of the line instead of like in line 2 where it was measure 4 of the line.
right,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Another song.
All right.
Another song that you should take a quick look, that really follows this same kind of pattern to just understand the chord progression is Puff the Magic Dragon.
Okay.
What it does, it's in the key of G, so it uses all the same chords, but
Yeah.
it also uses a couple of secondary dominants. Like when it's heading to D, it's going to get there by using its dominant chord. That would be what?
Its dominant chord, which would be the 5th of D, which would be A.
Right. So that means we're going to use an A7 in here instead of like A minor that would be in the key.
Yeah.
Only when we're going to D. We might have A minor somewhere else. And so the progression, what happens is it goes from 1 to 3. That would be what?
We're in G here, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a B minor.
So then it goes from 1 G to B minor.
Yeah.
To 4.
C.
And then back to 1. So that's one line. There's our 4 measures.
Right.
E, B minor, C, G.
Right.
Now we need 4 more measures, and the 4th measure is got to be chord 5. So this line starts on 4. Frolicked in thee. Now we have a quick change, meaning half measure each of 1 to 6.
Okay. So
Autumn.
1 to 6, which would be E minor.
So that was 2 measures. We had a measure of 4, and then this measure that was split between 1 and 6, G to E minor. And now we need our secondary dominant for a measure. We want the last measure to be D. So the 4th measure of this line has to be a D chord. So we need the dominant chord of D.
Oh, the dominant chord of D. Okay. So we're back to A.
Right. So we go to A7 here.
A7.
Land called Hana. And then to 5. And so the A7 was in there to take us where?
Here.
Yeah. Do you hear it? Are you hearing the melody in your head?
Oh, yeah, now I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're halfway through, and we landed on 5 in measure 8. Let me play through that whole thing once, and I'll call out the chords again. We've got 1, 3, 4, 1, 4, 1 to 6. And our dominant to D, our A7, for a whole measure, and then D. And we're at like the halfway point, or the cadence here, where it's come to rest on 5.
Okay.
Now, the second time through, we have to be on 1 there.
Right.
That 8th measure of the second half has to be 1. So we're going to have to either skip something or compress something. So this starts off the same way. 1, 3, 4, back to 1, 4, And now our quick change from 1 to 6. And now a quick change from our secondary dominant to our real dominant. We squeeze these into one measure, which means we go to the A7 for 2 beats, and then the D for 2 beats, and come home to G. Hear it?
Yep.
And usually what they would do right there is put a turnaround in, which means kick it back to D or D7 for 2 beats too. Oh, puff. Actually, let me sing the whole thing, and since we got this recording, you can see how that all works. But then dig up like my chart to this and kind of do the, reanalyze it with everything we just talked about. Okay? It's going to go like this. Puff the magic dragon lived by the sea and frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called Honolulu. Puff the magic dragon lived by the sea and frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called Honolulu. Oh, dum.
Oh.
No.
No.
From the A7,
Oh.
yeah, you're not going. Oh, so we had the A7 to D in the second to last measure, and then the last measure is G, and it bounces back to D7 as the turnaround chord.
The
D7,
D7.
right? You hear it?
Oh. Okay.
See, we need the real dominant chord there to kick us back to 1.
Right. Okay. 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 I see. Okay.
So it's really just a classic example of a well-written progression.
Yeah.
A little bit more complicated than this because what didn't happen in Ashokan Farewell was any kind of secondary dominant thing in there. Everything was just in the key. But he wanted to keep it a little more old-timey, and this secondary dominant thing is a little bit more modern. They started doing stuff like this in the 20s instead of around the Civil War. So.
Okay. Even though Ashokan Farewell was written in what was 1993 or something?
It was written in '82. Yeah. But really with no, I mean, he just wrote it as a nice little melody, feeling kind of. If you watch my video, I tell the story a little bit, but mostly because he ran a camp there, a music camp at the Ashokan Center, and so. And so he just kind of wrote it as kind of a lament that camp is over and it's like now it's back to the real world and things like that, But it was, but Ken Burns was familiar with it and just thought it was perfect for his thing that was it was 1990 is when he put together the Civil War.
Civil War, yeah.
And that was the only piece he used that wasn't really from the Civil War times. He used a lot of other music that was authentic Civil War music, but this sounded so appropriate, and I think I mentioned this in there too, but I remember reading that the whole documentary is like 11 hours long, and there's an hour's worth of this piece being played in it, at different times. It's not just over the credits. It's in all kinds of scenes.
Oh no. I mean, you're right. It is etched in the brains of.
Forget it if you sat through the whole thing.
Anybody who was alive at that point in time and watched that, or anybody today that watches it.
So it made Jay relatively famous and hopefully a little wealthier than he had been. He probably just
got some royalties out of that whole thing.
Yeah.
The one tidbit story that I remember out of the Civil War series was Shelby Foote, who was.
And I remember he was captivating.
Yeah, Shelby Foote's writing his Civil War would turn out to be a trilogy, thousands of pages long, huge thing. But in an interview I saw, he talked about how in the writing of that, it took him, I want to say it was like 20 years.
I could imagine. I mean, yeah.
Something like that. And he lived in 3 different places in the South while he was writing it. I think it was Nashville, and it was right there in the heart of the war country. And the way that he wrote was wherever he moved to, he went to the local
Ah,
appliance dealer and he bought or procured from them a cardboard refrigerator box. So a box that refrigerators came in
yeah.
cardboard because it was big and he could unfold it
Oh,
and put it on the wall.
right,
And that then gave him a huge two-dimensional space to track the timeline
right.
and to track the story that he wanted to write. So however he was writing that particular thing, which so his notes were in front of him
Yeah.
while he was writing and wherever it happened to be. But he did that 3 times, apparently. So over the
Definitely remember every time he was talking, it was captivating.
oh yeah.
And although I think I read some pretty disparaging things about him later too. Like even after he died or something, he died 10 or 15 years ago, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
But there was a lot of I don't know. I think there were a lot of racial things going on in his own world, and which
Yeah.
partially to be expected of somebody from the South of that age. Um,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
so I felt a little, oh man, it's too bad the guy wasn't like he wasn't necessarily a great role model. Is what I guess where I'm going.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
historians are their own cup of tea too, and it's kind of like you gotta, yeah.
Oh yeah. He was quite a writer. Yeah.
It was kind of the same thing
Like, yeah.
with Ken Burns' series on baseball. Some of those guys, some of those old players who are now dead, were just the same thing when they were talking about like the Negro leagues and other stuff like that. It's like I was glued. I don't know if you watched that one, but it's
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, the perspective. My dad was from Rockwood, Tennessee,
ah,
and Rockwood, Tennessee is in the eastern part of Tennessee. It's um, right at the foot of the Appalachians, very poor.
yeah,
And he, he was like he and his four brothers, when they none of them went to high school. They all sort of made it through middle school.
right. And had to go
And
to
this
work.
was Yeah, this is during the Depression, and they left home and they rode freights during the Depression. That's
Yeah,
what they did, and they ended up. My dad eventually ended up in the Bay Area in Oakland, and he got a job as a construction worker on the Bay Bridge.
wow,
So that's how he got to Oakland and all that. But his his upbringing, I mean, they were sort of by nature and by where they lived, they lived in a highly segregated,
sure,
highly racial situation. And his, the way he talked was highly unacceptable in today's,
sure,
highly unacceptable.
yeah,
Um, but at the same time, what was interesting to me was the makeup of his coworkers. He was a construction worker all his life. He's a crane operator, and a huge portion of his coworkers were black,
sure,
and they to him in the work world they were his peer, they were his
yeah,
equal, and he had no, that was just the way it was.
right,
The language that they used and the way that they talked about almost each other was, today would be
yeah,
inflammatory, incendiary,
right,
uh, and all that, but it was really different.
yeah,
So I don't know. Ken Burns, you saw the country music series that Ken Burns did?
yeah.
Okay, I don't know if did I tell you the story about meeting Ken Burns?
No,
Oh, okay. So we went to, I suppose we got invited to this because we, write a check to PBS every month or something. Um, but anyway, we got invited to the premiere of the San Francisco premiere of the country music series, which was at the Palace of Fine Arts.
oh, okay,
And it was very cool. It was a lot of fun. So we went to the Palace of Fine Arts, the round building and all, and up on the stage, the format was, it was Ken and the guy that was the producer of his producer, Duncan, who that was his last series. He retired, but he and there's a woman who is the principal writer, all that, and they're up there in front, and they basically talked into an excerpt from each of the eight
Okay.
things. And so the excerpt would come up and they would talk about it. And it was really fascinating. It was really interesting because what they were talking about was principally how did they come about understanding whatever the particular element of the story was, whether it was the Carter family or all that. And it was really fascinating. And they talk a lot there about Marty Stewart and Marty Stewart's kind of take on country music, which was summarized in the phrase, it's 145, 145 and the truth.
Right.
That was the way he and so the whole thing was it would, and it was really good. And so we're leaving the building, and the Palace Fine Arts is round building, and we had parked over near the Officers Club restaurant, which you got to walk to in the Presidio. So we have to exit out the building and then walk all the way around the building. And so we were in the lobby for a little while, kind of just hanging around, soaking up the whole deal. We leave and walking around, and out the side door, which I guess was the stage door of the place, comes Ken Burns and Duncan, and the one, and then we're on the trajectory to meet them exactly on the sidewalk, which we do. And so we, I'm trying to think of, well, what do you say to this guy?
Right. Yeah.
All that kind of stuff as we walk up. And so we walked up, we introduced ourselves. He was very gracious. And so the other guy, I think I said, at the conclusion, did you believe that it was just 145 and the truth? And he said, oh yeah. Yeah. He was great. And so he was thanking us for being supporters of the thing. We're saying, those
Sure.
way, goes the other way. So yeah, my Ken Burns moment. Yeah, it was very fun. So
It's always funny when you meet somebody like that, and I'm sure in this case too. Maybe you didn't know this already, but my impression of him is he's very short. Is that true or not? Or did you even notice?
not very short.
Okay.
No, not very short. I would say he
I
was.
see him with other people. He looks small. You know.
Yeah, so I would say if I had to guess, he's probably 5'8", 5'9"
Okay.
ish. So my impression was he was about the same height as my wife. So that was
Yeah.
kind of, and she's about 5'8". So
Anyway,
yeah,
see.
yeah, good guy.
Okay. Back to work. So
Yeah,
we're gonna let me think about this now. We're gonna try to put the melody together in a strumming pattern, right?
yeah.
Is that the right melody at the end? Okay.
That sounded pretty good.
Okay. I think that'll work.
It's exactly it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Try to do.
Yeah. Okay. So the the first step of that, there are two kind of preliminary steps before you do what I just did right there. And that is becoming really familiar with the chord progression and even maybe having it written out, not necessarily even in sheet music, although you could use my finger picking version as the melody, but I think the first thing would, let me think, okay. Let's try to do as much of this by ear as possible first.
Yeah.
As far as figuring out the melody.
Right.
And then the chord progression, like you have to be 100% sure like of what chord you're playing in a measure and what the melody notes are in that measure, you know. So the melody opens up with two pickup notes,
right,
leading up to G, right? And what there is a D and an F sharp. There's measure 1. Measure 0 is the two notes by themselves, the D and the F sharp.
Right.
Now measure 1 is that melody G. And that note, you know, so there's the melody, right? G, F sharp, E, D, B. And that B is measure 2. That's like at the beginning of measure 2.
Right, right.
What I'm kind of doing here is just talking through like the assembly that you have to do, okay?
Right.
Which is find the melody notes and find and especially pin down what the first melody note is, what's on beat 1 of every measure.
Right.
Because you're going to have a chord change then that has to go with that, right?
Right.
So then we have to, so that's what I mean, there's a lot of steps kind of in this process.
Right.
And so once we determine that we've got these first two notes in measure 0, I just play them, it doesn't matter what happens there, but now I need this high G has to be hit as part of the G chord that I'm going to strum, because I want to hear a chord on beat 1 of every measure. Okay. And you might not have to have anything else as far as strumming goes. If you just hear the chord on beat 1 and then pick out the melody notes that happen, you know, we could eventually add in, there might be other spaces where there's room for more strumming. If there's a measure that has like just we're in 3/4 time, so a note that would take up the whole measure would be a dotted half note. There are going to be measures that have dotted half notes in them. So when you do that, you want to strum whatever, you know, so that the highest note is the melody note.
Yeah.
And then you could still strum for a couple other beats after that, and you could even strum notes that are higher than the melody. Like there might come a time when it's on a D chord, let's say.
Yeah.
The melody note could be this A right here on the 3rd string. What I might do, and let's say if that's a dotted half note, I would probably I'd try to hit, since it's beat 1, I need the bass note for the chord and that melody note. Well, right now that's just 2 strings is all I can hit. I got the D in the bass and the A in the melody. Right? But then I could strum the higher notes for the rest of the measure. So that would be how I deal with a dotted half note, particularly a low dotted half note. You know, where that is make sure you don't play anything higher than, don't do this on beat 1, where I just buried the melody note.
Okay.
Right? So again, back to the first measure, if we hear the melody as this, that's measure 2, and that's where I have G with B in the bass. Now we've been playing that G with B in the bass with a D up here on this chord. We can't have that here because we got to hear that B, that open B, as the melody. So now I've got this, and I could just keep, you know, pick out those notes, and again, I want to be precise as far as the downs and the ups. If it's on a beat, it's a down. Shut that off. And now I need to hear this as my highest note, and this is my lowest note.
Right.
B in the bass. That means I can strum 4 strings. Now, the way I got a good sound out of this, we might have talked about this in some other song, I'm not sure, was I'm grabbing the first string so that I don't hear this.
Yeah.
Right? Now, you could also, with some practice, you could get to where you could strum 4 strings and stop before you get to the first string, you know. So so now kind of like the boilerplate version of this. Again, I just pick out those melody notes, and I don't worry about filling in more strumming yet. You know, it's like that's going to be our third or fourth element that we add to this, right? Now I'm going to C chord, and the melody note's a C, so I kind of have my same deal. Now we have the situation that is very similar to what I just talked about, a D chord with the A and the melody, because it's an A minor chord, but the melody note is this E. It goes from E to G there. And so that means on that first beat, all I can do is hit these two notes, the A and the E. But thankfully, I have a third beat in that measure that has no melody, or at least on beat 3, I have room to strum the rest so I can hear more of the A minor chord. Although on the and of beat 3, I've got an eighth note on the and of there too, heading into now a couple of measures that are all just quarter notes, and they're all notes of the chord. Okay, it's just this long arpeggio, 6 notes, all that starts with a G chord. And this is where our E minor comes in. And I could let go of everything to come up and get this high B in the melody.
Yeah.
And now I have to figure out how to get to a C chord. And this is where you saw me pause and stop for a thing and say, I knew how I could do it, but I was trying to think, is there a way I can make this easier? What I ended up doing was played my C chord here as a bar out of the A's and added the B up here. But I didn't want you to see that until I thought, is there a better way out of this?
Okay.
Because that's going to be difficult, I think, you know. But we could get away with, like right there, what I just did was I just got the C in the bass and didn't drum anything. And so I need the C and the B up at the 7th fret.
Yeah.
And if you get in, on the first string at the 7th fret. First string.
Here.
Yeah. That's only the 5th fret. We need 2 more frets. Yeah, but the C has to be back here. You need a 4 fret stretch here. Keep going. You got to get that C back at the 3rd fret.
Oh heavens, I'm not sure I can do that.
Yeah, actually you probably could, but let's not. But here's the other option, is you could play the C on the 6th string. Where could you get that bass note on the 6th string?
On the 6th string, I should be able to get it right here.
Yeah. So you got to and now we don't really have much of a C chord down, right? I mean, so
No.
what you could do is just hit that. You could just hit those 2 notes using the pick and a finger to grab. Use your ring finger to pinch it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna go into all kinds of guitar tricks to to solve some of these problems. But that's what I would do here to make it a little bit more approachable than having a big old nasty stretch in there. Okay.
Okay.
So I come out of this little arpeggio. Now I need an E minor chord with the D in the melody. And now I can let go and come up here and get the B. What I would probably do is not get the B with this finger. I'd probably get it with a finger that would let me get to the C now in the bass, like get my first finger up here.
Yeah.
And now I can keep, and then because I have another, the melody even goes higher.
Yep.
But I could keep that, so if I use my first and second finger for the B here and the C here. Yeah. And so you just pinch them and then play now the pick could play the rest of those notes. Yeah. And then the next melody note is going to be back here. And we need a D chord here. So we could either come down here and play our D and add this note at the 5th fret, or look for a way to play D up in this neighborhood.
That neighborhood being, well, I could play it out of the A family.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Let's see, and I need to be at 7.
So this would be a bar, right? I mean, like if you're going to play the full A family chord up here, where would the bar be to make it a D chord?
Oh, so it would be here.
Right. Okay. And and yeah, now that would be minor. You gotta be
Yep,
careful.
minor.
Now that would not be D. What'd you just do?
Okay, so
You had D minor a second ago. Your fingers went into a D minor chord, but now to make it major, what you did was you changed families.
oh, I have to do
Right.
here.
Okay. Now, even though that looks pretty scary right now,
Yeah, not yeah.
oh, you got it. Yeah, you got it pretty clear though. That's good. Now, here's another major shortcut guitar trick. When we when you play a normal D chord,
Yeah,
we have the open D in the bass. We could
right
still use that as our bass note for this chord up around the fifth fret and only play the top three strings of that bar.
here.
Yeah, except what would
Oh, of the bar.
yeah, what about the note on the first string? What note on the first string would be if you were playing the D, the A and the A fifth?
Oh, I'm sorry, I got lost there.
Pretend you have again the bar would go at the fifth,
Bar will go at the fifth,
and then you would need three notes at the seventh fret, right?
right?
But the first string is at what fret?
The first string
What
is also back here at,
right, that's the note we need. So what we need
right.
at the fifth fret here,
Oh, we can play it like this.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. There's our D chord with an A in the melody.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, okay,
Okay. So you're on your own now for a little while.
okay, okay. Um, so find the melody, first note, or excuse me, the chord is on the first, is on the one,
Right.
and there's a melody note that starts it there usually, right?
I'm pretty sure every measure has a melody note on one.
And in this particular song, many of those first measure melody notes are dotted quarter notes.
Yes.
And so the next thing that's going to happen is going to be an up.
Right.
So just in terms of keeping time. Da, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we do have a pretty consistent rhythm in there. Da
Yeah.
da 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 dum ba da da dum da da da. Now we have something different. Bom dum. We have two quarter notes on one and two,
Right.
and then we have actually now on two we have a dotted quarter note. Bom da da dum. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember that. Okay. And then march through it from there. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, this will be fun.
So, if you can get through the first eight measures, if you can piece even the eight measures together, the rest of it will probably start getting easier because it is a little bit repetitive.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, I think to take it kind of like one measure at a time, and figure out the way to assemble the parts.
Okay.
Because in a lot of those, you may have some options that you have to weigh in each one. It's like, oh, maybe it's better to play this note not open. Maybe it'd work out better at the fourth or fifth fret, depending on what note it is of the lower string.
Right.
No. In this case, none of that really happened when I was playing it there, but because the melody gets fairly low, not only does it get down to the D string, it gets down to notes on the D string. At
Yeah.
least in the first eight measures, so, and that means we just need a bass note below it and that melody note on the fourth string.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I will, I'll give it a wing.
Yeah.
See what
Yeah.
you think. Okay.
All right. Good luck with that. We'll check back on it next week.
All right. Thanks, Neil.
All right. See ya.